Under the laws of occupation, all those that are not Hawaiian subjects that United States allowed to come into the Hawaiian Kingdom are considered hostile occupiers.
Yes.
The Hawaiian subjects under the international law is considered as protected people. So within the laws of occupation, if you get familiar with the various parts of the laws, then it becomes a lot clearer. So under the laws of occupation, the only way the non-Hawaiian subjects that live here can become part of the governing participation is they would have to naturalize under the constitutional laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Period.
Or they would have to swear oaths, right? Yeah.
That all comes under the constitutional laws of the kingdom. But let me backtrack a little bit, for you. I know with Uncle and Auntie here, and I think for most of us, what we're concerned with was the semantics that they use, because a lot of the semantics that they use confuses a lot of people, especially those that are not to legalese and what have you. A lot of times, like us growing up, we knew what was right, what was wrong, but we couldn't find the right definition for it. As we got older, some of it was more clarified, and then when that definition fit, then we began to use those particular terminologies. But we can see what the United States has done with the semantics, that if people aren't aware of it, and they keep using the wrong semantics or use a different definition of it, then people are going to get more confused, especially when they throw it in their arguments. We're talking of apples and they're talking about, plums. So there's the confusion of the definition that they use. Same thing like federal recognition. There's international recognition. There's a recognition of our Hawaiian people within Hawaii. And then now they want a domestic federal recognition. So they're leaving out part of the adjectives, and it just confuses more people, because when they write out that policy thing they had for the DOI, they were saying we had 150 statutes that federally recognize the native Hawaiian. Now they also finite between uppercase N and the lowercase n, which is two different things in legalese, as you know. So it gets more confusing. So that's why with a lot of us, we're concerned about using the correct semantics and eliminate a lot of the labels. Like, we're not a sovereignty group, we're an independence group. So if we keep it on track, they try to throw that up, and then we just pull it back and say, no, we're an independence group. We already have our sovereignty. It's the same thing like when they keep using nation to nation. They'll use nation within a nation. I keep telling people, don't use that jargon. That's theirs, nation within a nation. That's integration. That's not a true definition that we know of as being a nation. And we knew that the relationship was nation to nation, not nation within a nation. Same thing like, we gotta quit using the word indigenous, because it falls into their box. We are Hawaiian subjects, or you can say Hawaiian nationals. You cannot use colonization or decolonization. Legally and lawfully, it's a deoccupation that we're looking for. What has happened is actually Americanization, not colonization, because the United States didn't colonize us. We are already recognized as a nation. So the same thing like the state of Hawaii, it'd be proper to use alleged, because they have to prove that it's legal, and they cannot. So we have to come together and start using our semantics, and I think that was griping uncle and auntie over here. It was more of the semantics that rub against us, and a lot of us here today. So it's trying to understand different things. The laws of occupation are important to understand, so you know where the violations are and where we are protected. It's all under the law of occupation, okay? Now, there's a thing that I've been wanting to tell people, why we are still Hawaiian subjects of the Hawaiian Kingdom. The biggest document is the Kue petition that they kept suppressing. And they use the word petitions. What it really is, it's a national plebiscite. And we have to recognize this as that, because all the Hawaiian Kingdom subjects signed it. Yes, it was a petition. But in actuality, legally, it was a plebiscite or a referendum. And that's what we're saying. Now, think about it. The Kue petition is comprised of supporters as well as the Hawaiian Kingdom subjects, irregardless of ethnicity, okay? So you got to look at the Kue petition. What does it stand for? The Kue petition did not recognize the U.S. Republic of Hawaii. They didn't recognize it, its jurisdiction or its authority. That's why they had the protest was for against the annexation. Doing that, their mindset, which they were trying to be diplomatic, was not to tell the U.S. directly that they wanted to call for the restoration of the Queen and her government. That's sort of a given. If we don't recognize the annexation, that's what they're fighting for. Get the Queen back. And you can hear it all through their stories, their books, their protests and everything. Now, my two great-grandmothers that I grew up with as a boy let me know about it. And they said, "Hey, Hawaii'o, Aole, Oli Melika." So at a young age, I already knew I was a Hawaiian subject. So I would also defend that. Back then, there were just too few people that did it. Now, here's the catch. The Turpie Resolution, people wondered how come Cleveland didn't really pursue it. Now, back in the 31st of May, 1894, came the Turpie Resolution. What the Turpie Resolution did, it restricted all U.S. officials as well as other nations to interfere with the situation in Hawaii under threat, because they stated in the Turpie Resolution that it would be an unfriendly act of that nation or U.S. officials or Americans to interfere with that situation. In other words, hands off. Or it's not a friendly act, it's an unfriendly act against the United States. And that's the Turpie Resolution, okay? So Cleveland could not go any further, and Congress was tying his hands on that. That's the reason why people keep saying, well, how come these other nations didn't stand up for the Hawaiian Kingdom? Basically, that was it. Now, you got to remember that Europe had just been war-torn, just got through with the Crimean War. They didn't need any more war to go to. And if they had to go to war, they were already spent, their resources and everything. And some of their countries was devastated that they had to rebuild. So they're not going to contest the U.S. for doing what it wants to do. At that time, by 1896 or so, the American Indian War ended. The U.S. already was done with the American Indians. Now comes this other thing. In 1854, the Hawaiian Kingdom was recognized as a neutral nation, and was reaffirmed back in 1864 as well, because the fact that the United States was going through a civil war. But Hawaii was one of the first countries to sign on as a neutral nation. The United States recognized Hawaii as a neutral nation. This is why the Queen had to go through the route that she did, which was very clever of her. Okay. Once the United States worked with the Republic of Hawaii, they proclaimed that the Republic of Hawaii's citizens were now U.S. citizens. Now, go back to the Kauai petition. The Hawaiian subjects were not part of the Republic of Hawaii. All the Asians in Hawaii were not part of the Republic of Hawaii because of the Chinese Oriental Asian ban that the United States had. So they were already implementing the U.S. laws and everything. Now, as far as the occupation, it was still ongoing, contrary to what a lot of them said, and that was because once Blount pulled down the flag, he didn't remove that PGs, the provisional government. It was left there. So the occupation was still there. You know, pulling down a flag is like, pulling toilet paper and wiping your okole. It does nothing. What the PGs did was they had hired mercenaries. The mercenaries were U.S. mercenaries. Therefore, the occupation was still in effect. So now when the United States went to the Republic of Hawaii, they turned over, they declared all the Republic of Hawaii citizens now U.S. citizens. Who did that leave out? It left out all of the Hawaiian subjects and all of the Asians. They weren't part of the Republic of Hawaii. So you can see where today we are still Hawaiian subjects. Okay.
Question on that side.
Question here.
Hey, you guys, in the meantime, I just wanted to make... Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. I just wanted to make it very clear that, we expected to have a brisk conversation. And there's no doubt that there's many, many positions being expounded upon here. And it's all very, very good. What's really important is that we don't try to outdo each other, because there are so many positions that we have to consider from. And no eye can see all those angles. And so it behooves us to embrace each other and look through each other's eyes to see what you did get a glimpse of. Because when we start putting those glimpses together, can we come up with a real picture that we can motivate ourselves with? And so don't be in a rush, because we got 3 days. Yeah, I know everybody wants to get their thing in right now, but that's why we have 3 days. This is going to go on and on and on. And I hope it gets better and better and better, and more people with more thoughts come down and start sharing their information, because we got to figure out how to make this nation rise and not just keep it in academics. Because right now it's in an academic. And if we cannot move it on the ground, what's the sense? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question.
It was mentioned that the Popolokui petitions are, in fact, not petitions. They're a plebiscite.
Yeah, it's national.
A plebiscite is defined as the direct vote of all the members of an electorate on an important public question such as the change in the Constitution. So, my question is, how is it a direct vote?
Remember that a lot of them were still in office of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So
So they're subjects to the Hawaiian Kingdom, but they're not a part of
they weren't part of the Republic.
the Republic.
Plebiscite is basically one massive vote by the population.
Yeah, and so I would hardly think I mean, it could be a something. But what I'm trying to say here is I think it's very important that we're not just stumble up all the time on the legal terms that the United States uses. And that if we find places that it stumbles, we should make our own glossary. And state code is what they're saying.
No, just being embarrassed.
Okay, I'm gonna just ask a few questions. I'm gonna take it a little bit sidestepping here. I'd like to get a little bit of opinion of what you guys think is happening with this Department of Interior's move to try to make you an Indian. Because there's obviously a very concerted effort going on. If you go to these meetings, you get all of 2 minutes to be able to say what you got to say, and you can't even give your name and address in that time. And so, I am curious as to what other people see. Everything from Act 195 that supposedly gave Kanai'olowalo this right to strip all these names out of the different organizations, as well as I put this in my testimony too, that the United States Department of Civil Rights has already weighed in on this tribal condition of Hawaiians and are against it. Has already approached the president saying that it's against it. So I'm curious as to what other people see, what they would like to say about it. How do we stop such nonsense? Because their whole thing is that they're going to move with impunity. They don't think that you have a way or a manner in which you can stop this. So, anybody want to sign off on that?
File a complaint.
With who? With who do you file these kind of complaints?
There's nobody to file a complaint.
That's the question.
So you go back to your people and tell them, take your name off Kanai'olowalo and bring down the numbers.
Yes. And so one of the things that Lawrence was just talking about is one of the practical ways that he sees is that if you find your name on Kanai'olowalo, or you don't even have to find your name on Kanai'olowalo, you could just write to them and say, if my name is on there, take it off, and diminish that number. That would be a great way.
My name was down twice.
I was the first one to take my name off
They're
the
gonna do is, if I was doing that,
I can happily say that they are being very careful not to put my name down, because I've already sued them on that same matter.
File a complaint. File a claim.
What I see is that they're really trying to re-identify who you are.
when they see 125,000,
That's not
100,000, 90,000, then they would give
They
them,
don't know anything about
then they would have to do what they
our
do
history.
coming down.
They don't know
Giving
anything
you
about
5 questions,
what
what we're going to do to the whole.
we go through every day. Okay? You, who are they? Why?
If I ever go about that, I'll take 10 years.
Why do we want to go to the Empire? Why do we need the Empire? Because
And I'm thinking that they got the right amount of people in the 500,000 people. But I don't know what is the number, whether it's 125. Yeah, okay, so that's fine. But
That's the thing of language. That's the thing of religion. That's the thing of culture. Why are they country? And otherwise, I am Indian. How dare they? How dare they?
That's what they want. I think that's what they will use to do this if they have the. That's the way for me.
I think you gotta file a complaint with all who created Kanayola. File a complaint with all for creating Olowalu.
It was created by the legislature.
Created by our government. So you gotta file a complaint with all because they're supposed to be our people. At this time, since 1978, since they was voted to be our leaders for the betterment of our people. So that's who we should file our claim and our complaint with. And see that to every congressman sitting in that building over there, every legislature, every single city council person in that building over there, the mayor and the governor. That's the way we need to do it.
I'd like to hear what I'd like to hear what Zuri has to say.
For me or
Zuri?
I'm just sharing some of my manao.
please do.
I think you all here are more brilliant than I am by far, so I'm just gonna throw something out. Uncle Lancelot, that's a great, I guess a great route to take. I don't think there's one single way that we should hit it. I think there's just many different angles that we should take it at, and that's one major one. I mean, OHA's funding this thing, OHA's behind this in some way. They're controlling the cards, so to speak, in part. You got to take that beast out from the inside, I think. That's one of the ways. I think they're going to try to put it through with or without our consent,
Yes.
as they've been doing anyways. They can try, and then it's now in our court. How do we respond to that? I think they've lined up their chess pieces strategically to cram this through, to just ram it through without our consent. They got Esther Kiaina. She's in there now as the assistant secretary, right? You see all these puzzle pieces fitting in. They've planned this for some time. They've had a lot of time to plan this, and they're now executing it. I think they're kind of rushing it through because the pro-independence movement is gaining momentum. We're on fire. We see all of our people at the hearing coming out, speaking in favor of our nation, who we are as Hawaiian Kingdom subjects. I think they're scared, and I think they're taking these drastic measures, but I think their intent is to put it through whether or not we want it. And I think part of our strategy has to be, if it does happen, then what do we do then? I mean, if they force this on us, do we have a solution to combat that?
It's already been forced on us. If you read Act 195.
Correct.
Kanayola Wala is already
So
chosen to
then,
be
what you're
our
saying,
new leaders.
you're saying is, if they continue this, what's our comeback?
I mean, how do we answer it if indeed they do put this through, even without?
So here I am, a kupuna, listening to a younger generation telling me or asking me, how do we do that? How come you asking? You're supposed to be smart. What happened to your brain?
I defer
Did it
to
run away? Did it run
I defer
away?
to my kupuna for the answer.
No.
But what they put in
Wait a minute.
That was good.
Wouldn't it be right to ask you though? Wouldn't it be right to ask you?
No, wait. You sat here and listened to us, and now you're coming back and asking us again. You're the younger generation, okay? We know the history of all these people. We know who all the players are. We know what they've said, what they've done. We know who sold us out.
Correct.
Okay, so now you're coming to ask us. Okay, so what were you doing when you was getting your bachelor's degree? Now you're in law school. What were you doing? Were you listening? Were you reading? Were you paying attention? I mean, what kind of sources have you read? Have you read Lily Kala's book?
I have.
Have you read all of the Hawaiian historians' book?
I don't think I have.
I see. So then, if you haven't read what those kupuna say for the past, where is your basis of your foundation for you to come and ask us?
Well, I don't have my foundation is rocky. I will say
Foundation is what?
it's very rocky. I'm young. I've grew up in a time
That's
when
no excuse.
I know
sorry.
I'm not making an excuse, Auntie. I just want to explain that I, for the longest time, for most of my life, I've been hit with the chains of colonization. I've grew up in Hawaii just as much as any of us have, but I'm at more of a disadvantage in some ways, where my parents weren't free from the chains of colonization. I can only choose my way of growing up by how I was raised. I've done, I guess, a decent effort at trying to break those chains and come out as best as I can, but I defer to kupuna because you do know